I was asking you about something that I actually got to talk to Rod a little bit about, which is I suppose, the value of these labels. V and I used to have these kind of playful arguments about whether or not it was useful to just have more and more and more specific identities. And I guess I'm curious whether or not you feel like the word neuroqueering really adds much to our culture, to our understanding of science, or to the world at large.
Um, yeah, I think it probably does because trying to figure out your identity, whether it is your sexual orientation or gender or romantic orientation, is incredibly complicated, and it becomes more complicated if you're like neurodivergent, especially if it's in a way that affects certain like the way you interact with certain social constructs. And I think like words help us frame thoughts. I mean, there's like the whole Wolffian hypothesis where words enable thoughts, the chicken, the egg, who knows. But
Sure. Yeah.
um I think when you put a word around something, it makes it easier to frame it and also almost validate it. Especially like say, if you're part of a minority of like a marginalized population such as autistic people, where our experiences go largely questioned and invalidated at every turn. When there's a word around like something that you experience, it helps people maybe accept it and understand it better. And I think also it makes it more tangible, because sometimes like it's very easy to be walking around feeling a certain way and feeling like everyone else has this figured out or that figured out, and there's a difference for you and it feels like a personal failing or a deficit. So I think when you have like a word like neuroqueer, it signals that you're not alone in your experience, that there are other people who experience it too. And it also, lends itself to people looking into it and trying to understand it more. So I think like when you have a term like that, it helps kind of bring you into a collective, and it's also an action. Like it's like we've already said, like it's a verb. Like there is activism that can be done under the banner of neuroqueering. Like it's it's an active word that begs for active participation. So
Sure.
in that sense, it has a very practical and actionable element, which to
Which
me
feels
makes it,
validating to
yeah.
me. Like there's something about being able to say, "Oh, I'm not," not that a autistic identity or any of these other things that we're talking about are a carte blanche to just behave in any way that you choose to behave. But there is something to be said about having a terminology for, look, I'm not being obnoxious. I'm not being an asshole. I'm not looking to be a distraction. I'm not trying to make this about myself or whatever else, but instead being able to say, like, I'm neuroqueering. Like, I am choosing to express myself in a way that is perhaps not unconcerned, but that it's not like beholden to other people's level of comfort.
Right. And it's again like it makes a space for these things to happen, and it also makes a space to talk about and explain experiences that might seem, what's the word, wibbly to others. Like I have a lot of parts of my identity that would come very firmly under wibbly, like romantic orientation, for example. A lot, I've always like tried to like, what is romantic attraction? And the answers you get will be very socially defined. It's like, well, like dates and rose petals, and I'm like, well, I don't do any of that. Like, I don't act in these quote unquote like typically romantic ways. So
Mhm.
am I aromantic? And I don't know where it all fits. And with like neuroqueer, it kind of captures these things where it's like you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes, like we're wired in a way that maybe we're just not going to figure that out so well. So it gives shape to something that has no shape. And also, like you said, like behaviors and art and performance, like it gives visibility to things that maybe don't have a lot of visibility or acceptance. Like I was out doing something and not having the best of times. So there was some like hardcore stimming happening.
Sure.
And it was like I was going to buy algae shots, and there's like a pediatrician office there, and there was like some kid looked actively delighted. And, like if you're this like autistic kid who's been told, quiet hands and active listening and everything else, like if you see adults out there doing these things, like you're not a baby for doing whatever, like it helps validate that you're not alone and you're not defective. Like it is a fair and valid form of expression and being. And I think like people need to get more aware of that. Like one of the things I spend a lot of time, if anyone is like friends with me on Facebook, is bitching about memes. Bitching about memes has been my pandemic hobby, because like I keep seeing these things and we're like blah 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 blah, that's toxic behavior and that's a red flag, and I'm like, that's neurodivergent behavior and you're totally miscategorizing it. Like in some situations maybe it is a red flag, but assuming neurotypical intent behind every action is problematic, because you are defining neurodivergent people as, being toxic for being themselves. And, that's how you get these like, alien and sinister readings of neurodivergent people. So yeah, I spent a lot of time going through these like, like really, I want to say like pop psychology memes that will come up.
Sure.
Like, let's normalize not interrupting a story with a story about yourself. And I'm like, well, that's how a lot of neurodivergent people show empathy and connect to your story.
I remember you posting something
Right.
to that end, and I am pretty sure that I like cut and copied it and sent it to my partner because I mean, honestly, we're talking about self-diagnosis and these different things. Just following you on social media is a masterclass in like better understanding yourself in these kinds of topics, because there
Right.
is real value in having some language around all of this, being able
Right.
to say like, yes, maybe this is me, but it's not just me, and there
Right.
are adjectives that we can use to describe it. There are other people who experience it.
And I think like showing the other side shows that maybe other people's views of the world aren't the only views of the world, and their understanding of what people are doing isn't always what people are doing. And hopefully we can get to a place where things are more open to everyone. Like when I think of like neuroqueering and things like that, I think of accessibility. Like Hannah Gadsby had this thing in Douglas where she was talking about the first time she went to Pride, and it was all very
Mm.
loud and she wanted to know where the quiet gays are. And I was like, where are the quiet
Where
people?
are all the
And
quiet gays? Yeah.
but the thing is, like, sometimes these spaces are so uh like overstimulating and inaccessible to people with, different like processing disorders, for example, or, like autism. And there needs to be space for, autistic gays. You need to be able to be gay and autistic and participate without being massively overloaded. And I think that's one of the things where things come together a lot. Like trying to find your people is challenging when you're neurodivergent.
Mm,
Trying to find your people when, you're of like a sexual minority is challenging. And then when you put them together, wow. Because like there's all these like sort of subtle signals. It's like if someone's like, are they gay or not? Like I've got friends who are like super duper femme and no one thinks they're lesbian ever. Because they don't look lesbian enough or act lesbian enough, or whatever. So it's like really difficult. And I think like neuroqueer especially helps the double rainbow find each other, like if
sure.
people can understand more. And definitely like, yeah, people need to really, really like break out and understand more, because some of the meanings I've seen attributed to otherwise neurodivergent behavior, which is completely inaccurate, is just wild to me.
Sure.
And I think, like, activism in that space is kind of awesome and powerful, and how we get to a place where people can just be.
Yeah, at least on a certain level. I mean, just energetically, I mean, my reaction when I see this term out and about and I see people using it, there's a transgressiveness about it that is to me so validating to get away from this pathology paradigm and to increase like acceptance and visibility of neurodivergence, and just to encourage people to remember that there's no right way to be, that
Right.
there's no wrong way to be. And when we're talking about people being themselves, being their neurodivergent selves, that's actually a beautiful piece of diversity rather than a problem to be stamped out or a disease to be cured.
And the thing is, you can't cure it. I know there's a lot of people out there who are going to be very upset at that. Mostly the autism moms and parents who are very into the idea of a cure. But the thing is, like, the brain you got, the brain you got.
Sure.
Like, if you pop out into the world with an autistic brain, you will eventually pop out of it with one. Like, it doesn't, you can't change your brain. um, and, like, people need to accept that, because all you can really do is make people better at masking, but it doesn't make them not autistic. It just makes them work harder to try and be something else. And
To try and cover up pieces of themselves.
right,
Yeah.
and it is acting. Like, I mean, I've done it for years, and still find myself doing it sometimes too. But like, it is acting, and it's exhausting, and it leads to really poor outcomes for people. Like, imagine if you spend all of your energy you do doing your job just acting like you're looking like you're doing your job, and then you have to do your job. Like, on top of it, like, yeah, you burn out fast. And I think, like, the more people can embrace, the people as they are, the lot less time everyone has to spend pretending there's something they're not and acting this role that just isn't them. And I think, like, it probably benefits everyone. Like, I shared a piece about teaching, and this person is talking about how if they were to like, teach all children as if they were neurodivergent, neurotypical students would do well too, because they'd also get chance to, like, learn to regulate themselves and advocate for
Mm.
themselves. Like, there's
Hmm.
literally no losers there. And I think, like, if we just believe people when they say what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, and maybe treat people like these things are real and possible, and respect them how they are, there's really no losers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that brings to me to what is perhaps the most important question of tonight, which is recognizing that, this can be a seemingly like very niche topic. And I really appreciate the audience sticking with us tonight, even if a lot of these adjectives and labels don't really seem to apply to you. Ultimately, though, what can anybody watching this use this information to make a better life for themselves, or a better world for all of us? What advocacy, what directions, what would you encourage people to be doing or thinking based on this conversation?
I mean, one of the things I would ask people to do is to question the expectations they have. Like, maybe people have already started to do that. As you know, we've had more conversations around, like, trans rights recently. So people who otherwise hadn't been, I guess, exposed to these ideas are now getting exposed to these ideas and learning more. And I think, like, keep keeping your mind open to possibilities, and maybe being less sure that everything you know about all people, you don't. Like, there's no universal along the way. And I mean, I highly recommend, like, following, like, neuroqueer is a hashtag, and you can see people posting about their lived experiences with it, but also, like, their art and art literature, performance art, and you get to see and explore like these ideas. Because even if you're, neurotypical and heterosexual, you can only improve your life by learning more about the lived experience of others. Like everyone's always talking about how autistic people apparently have no empathy. We do, but maybe expand your empathy too. Like this, like Milton talks about the double empathy problem. Like autistic people understand autistic people, neurotypical people understand neurotypical people, and then we all get confused when we meet in the middle. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe take the time to look and learn more about how people experience things and present things. Make your events more inclusive. Like a few years ago, before COVID, at London Pride, there was Ace Space, which was like an Ace club that they did, and one of the the considerations was like a quiet space, because any autistic people coming are going to need somewhere to be. Like make your have accommodations and considerations so people who are neurodivergent can participate in like the other half of their double rainbow. And learn a little bit about different people and appreciate their art, because it comes from a different place, and maybe you'll see things in a light that you haven't seen before. And go check out some like neurodivergent artists and writers. Like there are so many amazing wordsmiths out there, and like open yourself up to a content and ideas that are maybe different to what you're used to. And don't share memes that share any
that have
human trait
shitty
as
notions
a
behind them.
universal thing.
Yeah.
Because there's no universal anything.
Yeah, well said. I know that we have already talked about a dozen different articles that I'm going to, make sure are in the show notes to this episode. Are there other resources that you might recommend for people who are wanting to do that work?
My gosh, that's a good question. I mean, hashtags are always a good one on social media, because people are getting more and more, you know, lively, for want of a better word. That's the best word that my brain came up with right now. There, so like look up neuroqueer art if you're an artist. Find these voices. I like neuroclastic.com. It's in my slide at the end. That's a really great site. They have a really good article on neuroqueer over there. Also, like even on the forums, we have a new neurodivergent like forum, like subforum. So if
Hmm.
you have questions around that, you think you might be, even if you're not on the A spectrum, it's actually anyone can talk there. You can go ask questions there, find out things there, and like engage with the community. Like even if you're not autistic yourself, the autistic community we love talking to people and having people learn more, like find out what's important to these different communities. It's really easy now. Like I am a child of the 80s. I remember where finding shows involved finding the one cool record shop and
That
then
had all of
digging
the
through all
zines.
the flyers to fly the flyer,
Yeah.
and then like follow a treasure hunt to like some really shitty pub somewhere. Like it's kind of easy now. If you type a word in and you put a hashtag in front of it, you can find so much stuff. And support it. If you see it, support it. Like, and if people are sharing things that you now know are questionable, like challenge them or question them. And oh, the biggest one I can ask for, this is like at least for an autistic person, please
Sure.
back up autistic people on social media. Because the
Mm.
amount of times autistic people will say something, then get dogpiled and like shut up is phenomenal. So if like back people up. Because sometimes people will listen to the neurotypicals or whatever, because y'all communicate in a way that's not apparently super rude or abrupt or whatever. You know,
Yeah, we'll definitely get a number of those links up here in just a moment. In the meantime, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to leave with the audience tonight? Oh, Looks like we may be having some trouble with Miss O'Kiss connection. All right. Well, we'll hopefully get that sorted. But oh, oh. If you're here, I just wanted to take a moment and see if you had any final words you wanted to leave with the audience tonight.
It's a hard one. I guess like learning about yourself is a lifelong journey. Like you will probably be finding things out about yourself by the time you're 80. Like there's no rush to have all the answers. There's no rush to have it all figured out. Like celebrate yourself the way you are. And if you've been like masking or covering up some part of your identity for a long time, it might be hard to uncover where you stand on things. Like a lot of us, neurodivergent, queer, any combination of the two, have spent a lot of time hiding parts of ourselves. Like try and explore and find out more about what makes you tick if you think you've been doing that. And yeah, celebrate the differences.
Celebrate the differences. Yeah, I think that's what it all comes down to. Well, I'm going to let the booth pull up some of your links, but where can people find you around the web and learn more about some of these ideas?
There, actually. Like Instagram is a place where I'm fairly prolific. My Facebook, a lot of it is friends only, but if you message me with a, hey, I saw you on Secular Sexuality, I'll know that you're not, some weirdo who's just going to share Trump memes, and I will add you.
Honestly, one of my favorite follows, sincerely.
Thank you. I will keep on bitching about memes and writing long screeds about things that most people wouldn't normally care about.